So I think it's time to get started with continuing our discussion. So do we have the first three speakers?
Good afternoon. There was a gentleman earlier that said he lacked motivation. Well, I have some to spare, so that's why I'm here. I want everyone to know I am motivated, inspired, excited, fired, and fed up, and I know I'm not the only one. I also know there's no debate that if he could be here, Martin Luther King would be here today. And Martin Luther King once said, and I quote, "Human progress is neither automatic nor inevitable. Every step towards the goal of justice requires sacrifice, suffering, and struggle. The tireless exertions and passionate concern of dedicated individuals." And I know if he were here today, he would be leading our marches, leading our rallies, and exhorting all of us to be zealous advocates on behalf of the unemployed, the underemployed, the uninsured, the underpaid, the nurses who are working late on the night shift, the fast food workers working multiple shifts, the factory worker working the swing shift. He would exhort all of us to be tireless advocates on behalf of the left out, the lost, and the luckless. He would say our most urgent task today, not just in the United States, but in the world, is to close the widening gap between workers who sow corporate profits and those greedy, green-eyed, shade, fat cat, overpaid CEOs that are reaping them. We're about to face an onslaught of the 4 Ds: division, diversion, denial, and deceit by the forces of the far right. We're about to face the 4 Fs from mass media: flim, flam, fluff, and facade. Do not be deterred. Do not waver. Martin Luther King said, "It is always the right time to do the right thing." Are we ready to do the right thing? I said, are we ready to do the right thing? I'm ready. I'll see you.
Hello. What an inspirational leadoff that was. So I'm here to talk about the importance of the charter amendment that we just filed. First of all, this is a historic and exciting time for us as working people, and I see this charter amendment as a way for us to have our voices heard regardless of what City Council decides upon, regardless of what the outcomes are. So, to give you an idea, we need 30,000 valid Seattle voter signatures on our petitions to get this charter amendment onto the ballot. So that means that we really need 50,000 signatures to make sure that, this goes through. So I see this as a tool, first of all, to put pressure on the powers that be, to stand with our working families and fight for a robust $15 an hour, plus benefits, plus tips, right? Yeah. Now, we've already seen that because we are part of this conversation, that the negotiations, we've always been part of this conversation, especially in the media, and we are here to pull the powers that be over to our side as working people. Now, like I was saying, either way, regardless of what we end up doing with these signatures, regardless of what the outcome is, this is a tool for us to mobilize hundreds of thousands of people. How many people are we going to be talking to about this? This is our chance to mobilize working people and stand up and have our voices heard as a community. So, lastly, I'd like to wrap up saying one of the workshops that we are having is about the signature gathering and skills that you will need to do that. It's going to be right over here. So for all of you that are interested in learning more about this, please come to our workshop. Thank you.
Hey guys, how are you doing today? My name's Kate. I just flew in from Philadelphia, and I'm happy. Thank you. I'm so excited to see all you guys here today, and I want to give you a brief update on what's happening in Philadelphia all the way back on the East Coast. So we had our kickoff event in the middle of February, and we geared up towards an action on International Women's Day on March 8th. It was the first action in all of Philadelphia that demanded $15 an hour. And yeah, so we were the first, it started late in Philadelphia, but we were the first to get it off the ground there. And there's been an outpouring of support there. Around 100 folks came out to support that action. We occupied and did mic checks inside 4 retail locations, and we got a ton of media coverage. So we really were able to kick off the movement in Philadelphia. Now what we're focusing on is building a grassroots movement that's made up of working people in Philadelphia. So we're focusing on actions and coalitions with other groups, but we're also out petitioning in Philadelphia's working and low-income neighborhoods every weekend, and trying to set up one-on-one meetings to start building neighborhood action groups. In Philadelphia, it's a majority city of people of color, and almost 30% of people in Philadelphia live in poverty. So if we want to see $15 an hour passed in Philadelphia, we need to build a movement that consists of people who are making, way below $15 an hour if we're going to build the power we need to make it pass. So we've collected almost 1,000 signatures, and we have a bi-weekly phone bank that's going on. Our core organizing committee is around 20 people who's showing up every week and going out to petition and making calls, and so we're making progress. So, good to be here today.
Hello, my name is Bobby Lewis, and I'm from Linwood, Washington. I'm a blogger at One Citizen's Opinion. I'm a member of the Washington Green Party, and I've been published on Independent Voters Network and raprehab.com. On March 31st, 2014, I published an article on income inequality. While researching this article, I found a World Bank study from 2002 called Inequality and Violent Crime. This study found that as income inequality increases, so does violent crime: rapes, murders, assaults, robberies. They also found that in areas where income inequality is reduced, the violent crime goes down in similar rates. So the minimum wage has been raised many times across the country. And in discussing that, I tried to find what's the argument against minimum wage, and I can't find any. There's nothing. There's not a single study. There's not a single scholarly article. There's nothing but rhetoric and sound bites that supports that minimum wage is bad. In fact, the absolute opposite is true. Anytime that we've raised the minimum wage, things have gotten better for the communities. And if we raise the minimum wage in Seattle, that's going to draw quality workers from the outlying areas to work in Seattle, which is going to force those employers to raise their wages to keep those employees. So it helps everyone. Now, in an effort to find out if there was any information that the opponents to the minimum wage have, to the $15 an hour wage have, I actually contacted some of these protesters sitting outside this building after lunch. And all they were able to provide me were sound bites and rhetoric. Sound bites and rhetoric are not facts. $15 now addresses income inequality in very real ways, and no one who works for a living should be forced to live in poverty. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Are you ready to fight? Are you ready to fight? All right. Whoa, this is loud. Okay. So, I think overall the proposal that's been presented to us is really very well thought out, and I'd really like to give some props to the people who put a lot of effort into coming up with a well thought out strategy and tactics. As we all know, this is a workers' movement. It's a working class issue. It's a working class struggle. And we know that the working class is the majority, not only in this country, but all around the world. But what is keeping us from achieving what it is we need as workers when we're the majority? This is supposed to be a democracy, right? Well, one of the factors that is operating against us as workers is the fact that our class is divided. It's divided by racism, it's divided by sexism, it's divided by homophobia, transphobia, and other forms of bigotry. And that keeps us divided. And so while I think, again, that this is a very good overall general strategy and an overall very good general vision, and I'm not going to weigh in on the issues that are these other ones like the CBO opt-out and what have you, but I would like to motivate adding a small bit of language to number 4, we aim to build the widest possible unity in action, and add to that sentence, our unity should be built explicitly on opposition to racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, and all forms of oppression, and this consciousness should inform all our work. I think that adding that, that language will help us build a stronger, more consciously anti-racist and anti-oppressive struggle for the $15 an hour minimum wage. Thank you.
All right. Hi, my name is Mark Drummond. I'm with the Freedom Socialist Party, and I'm also a member of Service Employees International Union Local 925 at the University of Washington. I'm also in the Columbia City Action Group, and this motion came out of our action group. We wanted to put a point after point 6 on the first page of that, the resolution, under the section building a nationwide movement for 15 as a new point, number 7. Similar to the last speaker's point, it reads, we support the fight for rent, excuse me, let me start over. We support the fight for rent control, affirmative action, and to stop the deportations of immigrants, and to tax the rich and use the money for child care, education, social services, and to support small businesses and nonprofits. Now, we did this because we wanted to build the strongest movement and the broadest movement possible for a $15 an hour minimum wage. We need to include in our struggle the other struggles that affect workers, especially the most oppressed workers. And this doesn't mean that we put all this laundry list into the initiative because it's against the law, but it does mean that, like Jane said, it informs our struggle and informs our organizing. And this will bring more people to the struggle, and we need to stand with them to support their issues, and because it affects all of us, and we're all in this together. So our action group believe that 15 Now should express this support in our resolution and in our organizing. Thank you.
I think this is an inspiring start for the campaign we've got in front of us. The signature collection, the gathering, building really a movement that can educate tens of thousands of people, harden the support for Real 15, and really build a movement which can contribute to rebuilding labor in the best spirit of fighting back. I think this is a movement, and I think it's a starting point where we've got here in this room with the strategy to win. I think that's important. It was great to run a socialist last year. It was even bigger to win, and this was the message. We can win. After decades of setbacks for labor, we put something forward where we can inspire people all across this country and beyond to really fight back. And just to look at that strategy to win, what is our strategy? I think the biggest part for us is to realize that we are really just a starting point. If we look at our team, Ted spoke about the other side, how they try to use our weaknesses and so on. Let's speak about also our side. Most of our team, the biggest part of workers, people in this city, they are not really engaged so far. They have doubts. There are questions about small businesses. There are fears of people who work in small businesses. What will happen with my job? The other side tries to exploit that. Our job is really to come together in action groups, inform people, educate people, speak with people. Every door we knock, every effort we take to collect signatures, I think this is something where we can move forward. Some people on our team, they think we should appease the other side. Unfortunately, Some labor, not unfortunately, luckily, some labor leaders really stand strong with us. Unfortunately, some labor leaders think that we should appease the other side and not wage this war that we are planning to do. What was the result of this strategy over the last 2 decades? Where we were stepping back, accepting the attacks of big business, and did they stop the attacks? Were they in any way appeased? I think this is our chance to appeal to labor, reach out to trade union activists, and much beyond, to bring people together and show that millions are stronger than the billionaires. This is our chance.
My name is Cheryl Zur. I'm a former president of my AFSCME local in Oakland, California. I was also a member of HERE back in the 80s. I worked at the St. Francis Hotel. I was a union steward there. I walked the picket lines during the restaurant strike, and I witnessed HERE there abandon the restaurants because it was just too hard to maintain the benefits and the wages of union workers in restaurants. It was so much easier to collect union dues from the hotels where everybody was centralized. And they essentially abandoned the restaurants. The reason I raise this today is not to attack HERE, but to point out that there's been a long period of time where there's a gigantic difference between the members of unions and what they need and what they're fighting for and their leadership. Their leadership has lunch with the Democratic Party and they have lunch with the business owners. And they don't come to the workplaces and they don't help the members organize, and our dues, and we fought against this and AFSCME, is used to support the campaigns of Democratic politicians who betray us, not just do nothing for us, they break every single promise. So the problem is that the CBO and anything like that that doesn't represent rank and file members. That's the voice of the union leadership. So how do you unite thousands of people to support 15 now and more? For this, you call them the same people who voted for a socialist, an open socialist for the first time in decades in this country. They voted for her because she said, I stand with you against the rich, against the corporations, against the Democrats. There is no need for a single compromise in this package, in this resolution. And I urge you to vote the CBO down and to lower the 250 employees is a total giveaway to quote-unquote small businesses. That needs to be debated here as well. Forward, and you're inspiring the rest of the country. We want more Sawants elected. That's another thing. 200 independent socialist candidates countrywide. That's where we need to go to overturn this system.
My name's Kaylin, and I teach at an after-school program for kids who live in low-income housing. Many of the parents of the kids that I teach work 1 or more full-time minimum wage jobs, and they're still living in low-income housing. I hear on the news all of the time about these new magic bullet solutions that are supposed to fix the American education system, like universal preschool, or getting rid of junk food in schools, or stopping suspensions, or having more STEM classes, or more standardized tests, or less standardized tests, or different standardized tests. And many of these things are really good ideas, some of them aren't, but none of them address what we know to be the best predictor of educational achievement, and that is the parent's income level. Living in poverty impedes a child's ability to succeed in school in countless ways, some big and some small. From not having parents in the house to talk to them, read with them, help them with homework, not having stable housing, not having enough food, not having adequate medical care, let alone mental health care, having responsibilities that children really shouldn't even have, like having to make meals for and care for younger siblings. Not to mention lack of access to tutoring, music, art, and extracurricular programs. The only way to truly give all children a chance to succeed in school and beyond in the rest of their life is to make sure that they and their parents are not struggling with the burdens of poverty at home. And the way to do this is by making sure that all families have the opportunity to earn a living wage.
Hello, I'm Linda. At the beginning of this conference, I noticed the chair welcomed everybody from all across America. Well, there are two of us who've come from the UK. Thank you. I'm a teacher. For 10 years, I was elected to the national executive of the biggest teachers' union in England. I'm now currently the secretary of the National Shop Stewards Network. And it is from that organization, the NSSN, that I want to bring you the most fraternal greetings. In some ways, your organization of 15 Now is similar to the NSSN. I haven't got time to go into all the details. And in some ways, the problems are the same. But I just want to give you one example where we did strike a success, where a relatively small organization made up of union people, young people, community organizations and others, where we were able to put pressure on the big unions. And I would say, in this campaign, the big unions are key, like in any pay issue. Through relentless pressure of one kind or another, we made sure that union leaders felt the hot breath of workers breathing down their necks. And we brought forward pressure to get our trade union congress of all affiliated labor unions. We made sure that through pressure, we got them to agree that they would call national coordinated action. In other words, we got our TUC, our big labor organization, to agree to call a general strike. Imagine if that was possible in the USA. Of course, that has not yet materialized immediately into a general strike, but the pressure is building on them, and we are helping to make sure that that happens. Comrades and friends, I'm really pleased and excited to be here at the beginning of your campaign. The NSSN has a conference itself at the beginning of July this year in London, and let me assure you that your voice will be heard at that conference, and I look forward to genuine cooperation between our organizations. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Oren. I'm a graduate student at the University of Washington. I'm also a member of the UW 15 Now Action Group. And what I'd like to talk about today is health. That's my area of study. And I think there's a lot of talk about what 15 will do for people in terms of take-home pay, and that's really important. But I think the income inequality in this country has a downstream effect, and that's health inequality. We know that people earning low wages have more stress at the workplace because they have less control over their hours, over what types of things they're able to do at the workplace, getting yelled at by your boss. All those terrible things add stress to people's lives. And then we see the people at the top, the CEOs, having a lot of control over what they do at the workplace, taking vacations, not having to worry about where the rent's coming from, those types of things. And we see in this country a health divide. The people at the top are living longer than the people earning the low wages, and that's not fair. And I think that's another reason that we have to fight for this, because we need health equality for all people in this country.
Thank you. I want to say how exciting it is to be here at the epicenter of this movement. And I think it's important to remind ourselves that even though we had a tremendous victory and tremendous success with the election of a socialist, at the same time, as other people pointed out, the movement is still at the very early stages. There is still a great deal of confusion, and there is a lack of mobilization. We're at the very early stages of this movement, and it's very important for us to take this into account in the way that we formulate our program, in the way that we present our ideas, because we really want, there is the serious risk. There is the risk of falling behind the consciousness, but there is equally the risk of actually failing to connect, failing to ignite the mass consciousness that's going to be necessary to counteract the massive amount of attacks, of deception, of lies that's going to be mobilized by the ruling class and the big business and the big corporations in Seattle and nationally, in order to try to defeat a historic movement. This is not only about the 15. This is about showing, about working people can actually begin to make gains. They can begin to show that we'll be able to work for a living, to, not just live to work, but work to live in this society. This movement has semblances to the past. Other people mentioned before the ignition of the civil rights movement. And we have to see that how the consciousness evolves. But my very brief contribution has to do with the fact that, there is one phrase in one of the papers that I read recently, is that there is a new uprising is coming. We saw over the past period, we saw the movement of the Occupy. We have seen the movements that have erupted across the globe against the inequality of capitalism. And that is what is actually coming. That is what's taking place. This is the reason why even a section of the Democratic Party at the present time, and we have to distinguish between the Democratic politicians and people who vote Democratic because there's no alternative. But at the same time, we have to show that still a section even of the Democrats are forced to actually acknowledge the pressure that's building from below. And that is why they're speaking. Even Bob Reich, the former Labor Secretary of Clinton, said it's better to give some reforms than to have a revolution. I think that is in recognition of the actual fact is that the Democrats are terrified of the midterms, and they're trying to co-opt, from their point of view, they're trying to co-opt the movement for 15. And that makes it, and they will do that with words and rhetoric. That's the way they're going to try to co-opt this movement. From our point of view, we need to expose also to show that this is not, that they're not really prepared to address inequality. That what Obama has addressed overwhelmingly has been a movement, we've seen actually an increase in inequality and so on. I think that this is something that we need to prepare in order to continue to struggle and build this historic movement to transform the relations in the U.S. Thank you.
Let me make sure I have this right. So, is this 15 tomorrow? No. Is this 15 in the future? No. So we have to act like it. No. Let me tell you something. We won't move anybody to do anything around this. And my niece is sitting next to me, and she keeps saying to me, "Unc, where's the enthusiasm? We got to be enthusiastic about this, folks. This is the movement. This is it now. Am I wrong?" And let me pick on the gray-haired folks, since I got gray hair. I'm going to pick on the gray-haired folks for a minute. Folks, you can't just come to this thing by yourself. You got to bring somebody younger than yourself to these organizing efforts. We won't be able to do it. We're going to leave here at some point. We've got to bring younger people. I'm a preacher by profession as well, so you can say amen or clap if you agree with me. But we've got to bring folks with us because we got to have some enthusiasm, folks. This is an opportunity. You know, every time, if you work for a living, when you punch that clock, you've been ripped off already. You know that, right? Right? Most of y'all are Marxists or socialists, and you studied some Marx, right? You understand the relationship between capital and labor, right? They can't do nothing without us. But every time you swipe that clock, they've already ripped you off. So this is a chance to take some of what they've been ripping us off back. And we've got to explain that to our brothers and sisters. This ain't that complicated. This is an opportunity, folks. This is an opportunity out of this world. This is the campaign we've been waiting for. This is the campaign, no other campaign. This is it. Folks are being ripped off left and right. Folks are saying this is the chance to build up your fellow workers' confidence. Folks are opposing 15 because they don't think they deserve it, right? They're opposing it because folks are saying 15 an hour. Well, that's not too much, is it? Is there anything too good for the working class? Of course not. So this is an opportunity to raise workers' confidence. This is an opportunity to say, this is the campaign. Say it after me. This is the campaign. This is the campaign. This is a campaign. 15 now. And we've got to act like this is a campaign. When you go back to your communities, you've got to act like this is the only thing going. All you're going to do is get up in the morning, shower, go to work, buy your groceries, feed your kids, and then work on 15 now.
So I want to start off by going back to something Jesse said at the beginning when we started this morning, to just think about how far we've come and how much has changed. Imagine back a year ago or a year and a half ago. Imagine what the discussion would be like if we were having a gathering then. Who here would have thought 2 years ago, a year ago, that we would have a conference of 500 people and a movement all across the country, not just to raise the minimum wage, but to raise it to $15 an hour. And it's not just 15, and it's not just Seattle. There was the victory in SeaTac, which was really fantastic. We had the organizer from SeaTac who spoke about that passed that ballot initiative. We've seen over the past year fast food workers and low-wage workers and Walmart workers organizing, going on strike, having protests and rallies across the country. We've seen in city after city and state after state minimum wage laws being passed, ballot initiatives, protests. We even have the President of the United States, as was talked about, has now become a fan of raising the minimum wage. But we have also an incredible movement here in Seattle. Seattle does stand out, that we actually have a lively, dynamic, fighting, grassroots movement, and that was reflected in the election, in my opinion, of Shama Sawant to City Council on the platform, with the signature issue being a $15 an hour minimum wage and winning almost 95,000 votes. And we should remember what all the so-called experts said. Some of them, they all said we were dreamers. It was completely ruled out, that it would never happen, that you can't win a citywide election, that you can't take on corporate money, that she was too, in the immortal words of the Seattle Times, she was too far left for Seattle. There were maybe even some in this room who had some of those concerns. Unfortunately, even some of our union and brothers and sisters in the leadership of the many unions did not think it was viable to support our campaign. But many of them have seen through the experience of the success that Shama had, the enormous support that exists for $15 an hour, and much more than that. That is an expression. It's a symptom of a deepening fury that's developing amongst working people in this country, of an outrage, an anger that we will not put up with this kind of inequality any longer. And I think the speaker earlier, David K. Johnson, the best-selling author about this issue of inequality, I thought he gave a number of very valuable facts and statistics and painted a really stunning picture of how big the gap has gone between the 99.9% and the 0.001%. And I think we have to really use those. I mean, really it shakes people when you can demonstrate those kind of facts and figures and show the reality of this unprecedented chasm that exists and the huge profits that the big corporations are making. I would disagree with him, though. I think I would not accept, I know there's different views within 15 now, but I would not accept that that is to say we're for a $15 an hour minimum wage or for unions means that we support the free markets or capitalism. In my view, I think what we've seen over the past 30 years is a brilliant demonstration, an illustration of what unrestrained capitalism means. It means a constant undermining of the wages and conditions and livelihood of working people, and a constant piling up of more and more wealth at the very top. Now, I think we've had a really wide-ranging discussion on a number of different aspects. I want to focus in my conclusion just on where we stand right now in Seattle, which is at the forefront of our struggle for a $15 hour minimum wage. Not just because it would mean a historic victory for 100,000 low-paid workers in Seattle, though that is not insignificant, but for the national and international impact it would have if we can win a 61% increase in the minimum wage in one of the biggest cities in the United States, the impact that will have throughout the country and also, yes, around the world. Now, last week, the mayor's advisory committee that he set up back in December came to its end. And they have not announced any sort of agreement, and that shows we have to say that his advisory committee has been a failure. And it was a failure that was inevitable. It was tasked with doing the impossible, to bridge the gap between the interests of business leaders who wanted to keep the wage as low as possible, and the interests of workers and advocates for 15 and unions who want to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. And they failed to cover up that gap. Now they are continuing to frantically try to come up with some sort of agreement, some sort of consensus that they're going to put forward that will try to paper over and hide that gap, that clash of interests that exists. And there's been a lot, we know what the outlines of that agreement is. And it does not look good, brothers and sisters. And I think we have to strongly oppose it. And it's only a matter of time. At some point, Murray and the people he selected, who we have to remember do not represent the people of Seattle. These are selected, hand-picked people by the mayor, who he's saying, you're going to come together and give me a recommendation, and then I'm going to recommend it to the city council, and the city council is going to rubber stamp it, and then the debate's over. Are we going to let them do that? No! We should remember the majority of his advisory committee are business representatives. Is that the majority of Seattle? No! The majority of his advisory committee were donors, Ed Murray. Is that the majority of Seattle? No. Labor was a minority. It was a small minority of the advisory committee of people who actually had campaigned for, who advocated, who actually pushed for 15. The majority of people on that advisory committee were all adamantly against it 6 months ago or 12 months ago, and now they're born again. But we know the basic outline of the proposal that they will magically cobble together in the next few hours or days or weeks. And we should spell it out. They know it's politically impossible to oppose the demand of $15. So they have been forced to accept that. That's not because they agree with us. It's not because they want higher wages. It's because of our strength. It's because of how strong our movement has been. It's because of the strength of public opinion. It's because of CTAC. It's because of the fast food workers. It's because of the election victory of Shama Sawant. They know the writings on the wall on that issue. So they have to concede that, but they are looking on details, which actually are not such minor details, to undermine it, to carve out the maximum loopholes, the maximum exemptions, the maximum ways to undermine what they can call 15 to appease the public sentiment, but to pay as little as possible in reality. And it will still be an increase. We should be clear, even with all the loopholes and carve-outs they want to add, it still will be a major increase in the minimum wage. And we should remember that's only due to the efforts of workers and activists of upping the pressure on them, and that's why we can't let them get away, that's why we can't take the pressure off. The kind of deal they're talking about, the loopholes and carve-outs that they want to put in there to undermine the minimum wage while still calling it 15, is a 7-year phase-in for small businesses. And what is their definition of small business? It's a definition that includes 97% of businesses in Seattle. So basically they're saying for almost every single business in Seattle, you will have up to a 7-year phase-in, and then for a very, very, very small number, it will be 3 to 4 years. That's what the 3% will get. They will get 4 years. What's under discussion, the details may change, but it's fundamentally what a self-selected group that Murray picked out in his advisory committee are debating is for so-called big business, which again is only the top 3%. They are saying if they provide health care, they get 4 years to phase into 15. If they don't provide health care, they get 3 years. Does Starbucks, does QFC, does Target, does McDonald's need a 4-year phase-in? No! We understand there's real concerns about small business. Small business is not 97% of Seattle businesses. We understand there's concerns about genuine small businesses, about nonprofits. McDonald's does not need 4 years. They can pay $15 yesterday. The outlines of the deal they're discussing includes accepting the idea of a tip penalty, and we had a really wonderful contribution from the sister who talked about the issue as it directly affects tipped workers, particularly in the restaurant industry. Are we going to accept a tip credit? No! What about a tip penalty? No! They are proposing for so-called small business, and let's remember again, under their definition, that's 97% of Seattle businesses, there will be a tip penalty and a health care penalty. They will penalize you if you get health care. In other words, employers who provide health care, we know the reality of many company-provided health care packages. Starbucks, they provide health care. It's just most of their workers don't use it. It's too expensive. You can't make any use of it. But they will be able to take a deduction and pay a lower minimum wage than another company which does not provide an even more crappy health care plan. This is the kind of compromise that Murray is trying to push through. Last point I'll make on it, they want to, the workers, the people of Washington State, the labor movement put forward a ballot initiative in 1998 against business opposition, against the Restaurant Association, which said there'd be a yearly cost of living adjustment, a yearly inflation adjustment in the minimum wage in Washington. Do you support that? Yes! People of Washington spoke out and won in a landslide election in 1998. They have the audacity to take that away from us and say we will only get the inflation adjustment after we get to 15, 7 years from now. This is the kind of tricks they want to play. They're going to say it's 15, but inflation waits till after 7 years from now. Do you think prices are not going to go up over the next 7 years? Is $15 today worth $15 7 years from now? So they're playing games with us, and they think they can trick workers. And that's where, and I think we have to also say there's going to be a debate amongst working people. There's going to be a debate within our movement. We saw a debate here, which is actually wonderful. I agree with one side of that debate, but it's important there's a debate here. I think we should include the CBO. But we also have to see there's going to be a debate. You know, I think we have to understand, in my view, unfortunately, a section of the leadership of the labor movement in Seattle, which played a key role in organizing the fast food workers, which played a decisive role in the CTAC campaign, who are campaigning for $15. I think, unfortunately, some of them think they have to support this proposal that Murray's going to be putting forward, and in fact sign their names to it. I think we have to say that's a mistake, but we all make mistakes. We need to appeal to them to join us in building a campaign going forward, regardless of whatever deal the mayor puts forward. That's not the law. The battle is going to continue. It's going to go to the city council. Big business is not going to stop with whatever deal they sign with Murray. Do you think Starbucks is going to respect the deal? Do you think McDonald's and Target and QFC and Safeway are going to respect the deal? They are going to pile on and demand further concessions from the city council. The same city council that they bought and paid for in their election campaigns. They will demand, the mayor's proposing a temporary tip credit and health care credit. What do you think will happen when it goes to the city council? They will demand, well, we agree with the mayor's proposal, just remove the temporary part, and then we agree. Maybe we need to have another year added to the phase-in. Or maybe it'll go through the city council. Let's just remember what happened with Bush's tax cuts for the rich. That was supposed to be temporary for 10 years. It's been over 10 years and they're still on the books. So they could even pass a temporary, so-called phased-out health care penalty or tip penalty. And what guarantee do we have over the next 7 years they will not put enough pressure on the city council to refuse to lift it? So we have to draw a very clear line and say we're going to reject that. Business is going to step up the pressure to dilute and weaken Murray's proposal. We need a vigorous campaign to strengthen it, to improve it, to force the city council to pass the strongest possible minimum wage. And that's where, and I'll wrap up with this, that's where our charter amendment comes in. This is an opportunity for us. The charter amendment gives us, while the city council will be having their debates and big business lobbyists will be whining them and dining them, we have the opportunity to hit the streets and talk to over 100,000 workers in Seattle in the process of collecting 50,000 signatures and organize an unprecedented grassroots campaign. It's an organizing opportunity. We can use the signature collection efforts to have action groups spread. We have 10 action groups in Seattle. Let's triple that. Let's have 30, then 50 action groups. Let's have community meetings, town hall meetings in every neighborhood throughout Seattle. Let's spread those petition sheets amongst hundreds of activists to take that into their workplaces, into their schools, into their churches, into their mosques, to talk with their family and friends, to go knocking on the doors of their neighbors, to have street corner tabling. We can create a whole conversation throughout the city that doesn't rely on the corporate media. We can get out and talk to over 100,000 people, sign up, have 50,000 sign up, have thousands sign up to get involved in 15 Now, to give us their contact information, to stay involved, to donate. That will be a chance for us to strengthen our forces. That's the only reason we're here, is because we've been organized enough to push and force the establishment to concede that they will have to debate this issue. We can use the signature gathering effort as a tool to up the pressure, and also to have a safety net, a backup plan, which will not be lost by our esteemed city council colleagues. They will recognize that there is an alternative option out there, that if they do not pass a strong enough ordinance, a law, that we will have collected the signatures to have a backup plan for workers of Seattle. Do you support that? We will have the option, if we decide in June, what's proposed in the resolution is to go forward out of this conference and start collecting signatures in May and June, and at the end of June, to come back together in a new conference at 15 Now, and take a decision at that stage of whether or not to turn in those signatures. If we turn in the signatures, that will be triggering a November ballot election, a popular vote in November on our charter amendment. We will have to weigh things up in June. If the city council does its job and represents the majority, the 99%, there's no need. We're practical people. Why should we waste our time and energy and have an enormous, long, drawn-out battle in November? We will put aside the signatures. But if they fail, if they capitulate to the demands of big business, we will have our backup ready. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Phil. Before everybody gets up, please, if we could just 1 minute. I want to thank everybody for an amazing discussion and debate that we just had. So just really quickly, what we're going to do, as I mentioned before, we're going to have the workshop.
Jacketed black families from achieving economic mobility in the present, how the past actually lives today in the present in these black families. The legacies of slavery and of Jim Crow and of generations of mass black incarceration operate in the present. And as long as that is true, there can be no talk of a post-racial America, because the people who are products of that past oppression as well as present oppression are walking around today in the present America. What we have found, especially since the great meltdown of 2008, is that Black American household wealth is now 1/20th that of the median white family household. That's the worst that it has been in generations. In fact, it's the worst it's been since they have been taking specific note of Black family wealth. It's perfectly clear to us that the burden of past discrimination was so great that the bottom fell out of Black family households under the shock of the Great Recession, and there was just a total collapse in that sector. This means that in terms of racial parity, that is, the progress made by Black households compared to white households, but we see that the progress that's been made during the 20th century was wiped out in the 21st century. And that tells us that what we've been measuring as Black progress are things that do not tend to ensure lasting economic stability in Black households. We've been calling things progress that do not tend over periods of time to increase the wealth of the household or to make it more secure economically. Whatever the usefulness of the Black gains in education, for example, and in access to housing, it has not been enough to prevent Black households from falling even more dramatically behind whites, even as those white households have also been doing badly. But as white households did badly, Black households did progressively worse than that. So we have to dispel this myth of Blacks narrowing the economic gap, because the opposite is true. Despite all the fanfare, despite that return to the March on Washington and folks singing hymns about how far we've come, by the numbers, we have not come far, and in many ways, we have fallen further behind. In terms of income, and that's the kind of inequality that most people discuss, the closest Blacks have ever come to parity with whites is 63 cents on the white dollar. That high point of 63 cents was reached in the late 90s, and that was under President Bill Clinton. That was during the years of his boom and bust economy. And of course, it boomed for a little bit, and then it busted, and so did we. Black income on the white dollar is now back to the same levels that it was around 1980. So overall, there has been no net increase, no progress in Black parity compared to whites since Reagan became president. Finally, we all know that Black unemployment officially has been twice that of whites for a very long time, certainly since I was a teenager, and I'm 64. But that's an understatement of the seemingly permanent Black jobs crisis. In many, many, many Black communities, Black male participation in the workforce, that is, how many people actually have a job, what proportion of the Black male population actually has something that they could call a legal job, that figure is 50% and sometimes less. And what that means is, if you have only half of the Black male population participating in the workforce, it means that it is normal not to have a job in Black America. No other group can say that aside from Native Americans on reservations. U.S. policy, therefore, has been ineffectual in changing Black people's insecurity in the workplace or the economic viability of their households when compared to whites. And again, whites are not doing well. So this is a comparison with a larger group which is also not doing well. Those are the objective realities. We can measure these realities by the numbers, and they're irrefutable. But This is a gathering, all of us here in this gymnasium, is a gathering about creating a new social dynamic. And that involves how people subjectively feel about their conditions in society. It's about what goes on in people's heads. That's what you have to deal with as an organizer, as a person who's trying to put a social movement in motion. People act on the conditions based on how they subjectively view how they're doing and how they're being treated. And so here in this age of Obama, which thankfully is nearing an end, we find that Black America is in the most bizarre conflict between the cold realities of Black life and what they so deeply wish would be the Black condition under the first Black president. At Black Agenda Report, we call that the Obama effect. It is a mass delusion. It actually must be explained in psychological terms. It's a mass delusion that swept over Black America's psyche with the election of Barack Obama. In 2009, the Pew Research outfit, which is thought of as being pretty professional, they confirmed that this Obama effect, which many of us had sensed out there and talked about anecdotally, they did a survey and they found out that it is real and that you could actually measure it. Every other ethnic group in the United States had reacted to the great meltdown of 2008 by registering dramatically increased pessimism with the state of the economy. That's a no-brainer. The bottom fell out of the economy and people got pessimistic. That's logical. They were correct, objectively speaking. The numbers said that they were correct. Every ethnicity was poorer after, as an ethnicity, was poorer after 2008 than they had been just a few years before. So it is logical that people would be pessimistic. Black people had been hurt worst of all by the great meltdown, especially in terms of household wealth, which we just talked about, going down to 1/20th of white household wealth. But the Pew researchers found that blacks actually thought that they were better off than they ever had been before. This is after the 2008 Great Recession. They believed that they were better off, that their families were better off, and that black people as a race were better off than they were 10 years earlier, when in fact they were far worse off. And 10 years earlier, they had been in the midst of the Bill Clinton boom peak when black incomes, compared to whites, had reached their highest level ever. They have since, of course, gone down. Other polling organizations saw the Pew Research results and they tried to see if they could duplicate them, and they did. They all found out basically the same thing. Black America had experienced its worst economic crisis in generations, but subjectively thought that the opposite was true, unlike every other group in the country. And that could only have occurred because there was a black family in the White House, which altered dramatically black folks' subjective view of reality. Clearly, this was not the most promising time to go out and ask black people to storm the barricades in Washington and ask for change, because they didn't think anything was wrong. They were living better than ever in their heads. And to be fair, it has to be said that the Obama effect was not just an effect on black people. It had a dramatic effect on everybody who calls themselves left in the United States, most of whom were effectively neutralized, at least for the first couple of years of the Obama administration. But it's been 5 years now, and the glow is finally off of Obama, even though most black folks will still not tell polling agencies that the glow is off. The reality does set in. Those of you who are organizers, and I know that a lot of you are, I know that you have seen this change, and especially over the last couple of years. And that means that one cynical, banker-loving corporate president cannot change the political character of a people who have historically been the most pro-peace and essentially the most socialist-minded ethnicity in the United States. And that's been shown by every poll that's been taken ever since they have specifically polled black folks. Although a large number of black folks suffered under the deep delusion that Barack Obama's own success and his own welfare was the same as their own, that cannot erase the collective worldview of black people, and a worldview that is profoundly progressive and that is steeped in struggle. The people in this room clearly have chosen the right issue, and I am certain that it will gain overwhelming support in Black America if you do the organizing end of the work right. That's because labor issues are black issues. Black people are often angry at labor unions, and for very good reasons. But there is also a racial character to the support by ethnicity of organized labor in this country. And here is the hierarchy, and I'll be winding up with this. This is the hierarchy by ethnicity of who supports labor unions. At the top of the hierarchy is black women. They are followed by black men. Below them, Hispanic women. Below Hispanic women, Hispanic men. And finally, at the bottom, white women, and at the very bottom, white men. And studies have also confirmed this in terms of who really enthusiastically supports the idea of organizing in labor unions and who resists the idea. So based on the political enthusiasm factor, the AFL-CIO ought to be run by a black woman. And if this movement for a $15 an hour minimum wage is successful, if it really does gain traction, then some of your best cadres will be black women. Thank you. And my script thanks you.
Well, it's not much I can add to Glenn, to be honest with you. But
Capitalism sucks.
Yes. Okay. I agree. But I think what's interesting in the conversation that goes along with that is Paul Ryan's statements in his 250-page document about re-examining the war on poverty and this whole question, the culture of poverty. I think is not a new statement. We've seen it many a times before. Bill Bennett, who was, I think, under Bush, the education secretary. We've seen it with the bell curve theory in Charles Murray. We've seen these ideas that black folks, and particularly young black people, don't have the ferocity, the energy, the ingenuity to find work, to find a decent way of living in the society. And I think what Glenn points out point blank is that this system was based on and created by the kind of oppression, subjugation of a whole mass of people. And when you deal with that kind of reality, you can see how we become underdeveloped in the society that's based on purely exploitation, the extraction of the surplus labor in order to enrich a tiny, tiny elite within society. And so I think a book that I would urge folks to look at, actually, is Khalil Gibran's, Muhammad's book, Condemnation of Blackness. And he highlights, actually, a clear effort by big business and by so-called reformers to say, you know what, these black folks, they're just prone to violence, they're prone of drunkenness. Let's not pay them any mind. Let them just stew in their own misery. And while a whole sector of new immigrants were arriving to the United States, many of them working side by side actually with blacks. This whole racial paradigm was constructed to divide and conquer the working class and poor, and at the same time continue to maintain the subjugation of a whole generation of African Americans, Latinos, Asians. We can go on and on. So I think what's interesting about this campaign, I'll stop here, is that this campaign allows us to re-energize and resuscitate the historical memory of not just the Black freedom movement, but of the Chicano movement, of the women's rights movement, the struggle against Vietnam, the idea that we have to be agents of our own change and of our own struggle. That's been forgotten, actually, because we're used to the NGOs, right, of at the end of our movements that were destroyed, that were many of our leaders imprisoned, many of our leaders gunned down in cold blood out in the streets, many of our folks becoming disillusioned that Capital won, that many of them just said, there's nothing we could defeat this monster. And so we have to remind them that there was a civil rights movement that had to go through compromises, actually, sometimes, to get what it was able to achieve. The key question I think comes out of all of this is that resuscitating the historical memory, what we can't forget is that everything that big business gives, and if we stop our movement, they will always come back to take back. Yes, sir. And that's the key question, I think, when we think of the New Deal under Roosevelt, when we think of the war on poverty under LBJ. That was trying to beautify capital in a period of profound crisis, of mass movements, still the distortion of the Soviet Union, but still existing as an alternative for so many people. If 15 now is to become a springboard to a more deeper question, the fight for 15 has to be linked to a fight to overthrow and dismantle capital.
Right on. Right on.
Right? You can't get 15 and maintain 15 and more if we do not begin to articulate a program and demands that talk about putting the resources in the hands of the 99%. That's right. And that, to me, is the crucial question. So it's a two-pronged process that walks side by side. That the fight for 15 is also a struggle about examining how society is constructed, who is it constructed for, and how do you and I begin the process of doing the kind of organizing that previous generations, and Glenn can speak to this, previous generations know about. And that's, to me, is the most crucial element to this whole process. That's why 15 now is so dynamic and has so many possibilities, because it opens up a bigger discussion. So I'll stop there. So we can open it up. People have questions, comments.
Can I add something to what you just said? James Clyburn's a black congressman from South Carolina. Not much good about him except this story that he told once, which I think is worth retelling. He was a very young man in the 50s, and he was working in the state legislature. So we heard the white politicians' comments a lot. He got to eavesdrop. I-95 was about to be constructed north, south, and the debate was where it would be located. When these highways are planned, they of course speak to the titans of industry, who are really who it's for, right. About where the route will go, because that has an impact on where industry will set up their plants and facilities. And so what Clyburn reports, he kept on hearing businessmen keep urging their local legislators to keep the route away from the joiners. And Congressman Clyburn didn't know, what the hell are these joiners? I thought we got the Lumbee Indians, we have black folks, and we got several varieties of them. But who are these joiners? And he finally figured out that the joiners, that was code word for black folks. And these businessmen used that code word, joiners, because they knew that blacks were prone to join a union. They were known to join a union. And so they lobbied successfully to keep I-95 as far away from the coast of South Carolina, which is the most intensely black counties as possible to keep it away from those joiners, so that the local workforce would not be so automatically pro-union. So our history in terms of being pro-union is a deep one. It is profound. Everybody knows about it, except our president, who keeps on talking to us about personal responsibility, as if he's channeling Daniel Moynihan.
That's right. That's right. Okay. Let me start.